After 5 weeks of deafness, I regained my hearing but didn't tell anyone. What my wife said to her mother when she thought I couldn't hear shocked me to my core. My name's Liam Carter, and until 5 weeks ago, my biggest problem was my wife complaining that I chew too loud. Real talk? She wasn't wrong. I'm an aggressive cereal eater. Cornflakes don't stand a chance in my vicinity. But here's the thing about irony. It's got this sick sense of humor that would make a stand-up comedian jealous. One bad slip on wet pavement outside our local Starbucks, the kind of fall that makes you question every life choice that led to that exact moment, and boom, the universe literally hit mute on my entire existence. The doctors threw around phrases like temporary hearing loss and inner ear trauma, like they were handing out participation trophies. They said it with this reassuring tone, like adding the word temporary somehow made waking up in a world of absolute silence less terrifying. Let me tell you something. There's nothing comforting about silence when you've been married to Haley Montgomery Carter for 3 years. That woman is expressive, dramatic, and has a personal vendetta against quiet moments. She's the kind of person who argues with GPS voices when they tell her to turn right. Excuse me, Siri, but I know there's traffic on Oak Street. She once had a full 15-minute debate with our Alexa about whether or not it was going to rain. The Alexa won, by the way. It rained. When I finally came to in that hospital room, tubes in my arm and my head feeling like I'd gone 10 rounds with Mike Tyson's angrier cousin, Haley was there. Her lips were moving at about 90 miles per hour, faster than a politician during election season trying to dodge questions about their scandal. Her hands were flying around like she was conducting an invisible orchestra, and her perfectly shaped eyebrows, which cost more than my monthly car payment to maintain, by the way, were doing that thing where they expressed about 14 different emotions simultaneously. But all I heard was static. White noise. The kind of emptiness that makes you wonder if you've died and this is just some cosmic waiting room. My life turned into the world's worst mime show. Except nobody was laughing and I definitely didn't sign up for this performance. For the first week, I kept touching my ears like maybe there was an off switch I'd accidentally flipped. There wasn't. The doctors ran tests. Lots of tests. MRIs, CT scans, hearing assessments where they made me sit in a booth that looked like something out of a low-budget sci-fi movie while they played beeps I couldn't hear. Each time, they'd come back with the same message written on their little clipboards. Give it time. Time. Right. Because that's exactly what you want to hear when your primary sense of communication has been ripped away like someone cancelled your favorite streaming service mid-binge. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in frustration. Everything became notes, sticky notes, phone notes, notebook notes. Our kitchen looked like a crime scene from a detective show, except instead of evidence markers, we had neon post-its everywhere. Took out trash. Need milk. Doctor appointment Tuesday. Haley downloaded every text-to-speech app known to mankind. Our phones became our primary relationship counselors, which if you think about it, is pretty depressing. She'd type messages to me with this look on her face like she was defusing a bomb. Then she started doing this thing, this absolutely maddening thing, where she talked to me super slowly, enunciating every word like I was an 80-year-old grandpa who'd forgotten his dentures and his brain cells. Liam. Do you want coffee? She'd mouth each word with exaggerated movements, and I swear her voice must have been at maximum volume because I could see the strain in her neck. Here's what she didn't understand. My ears didn't work, but my brain was just fine. Deaf doesn't equal dumb, but try explaining that through charades. The pity was the worst part. Oh man, the pity. Haley's friends would come over, her whole squad of Instagram-perfect suburbanites with their matching athleisure sets and their live, laugh, love philosophies, and they'd look at me like I was a wounded puppy at an animal shelter. They'd pat my shoulder with these sad smiles, and I could see them thinking, "Thank God that's not my husband." They'd bring casseroles, which in Midwest culture is apparently the universal solution to every tragedy. Lost your hearing? Here's a tuna noodle surprise. Your life falling apart? Try this green bean casserole. But here's the thing I noticed, Even in those early fog-filled days of adjustment, Haley seemed different. Not sad different. Not even worried different. More like inconvenience different. Like my sudden disability had thrown a wrench in her carefully curated life plan. She still took her morning selfies, still posted her daily, blessed, updates on social media with strategic hashtags, still went to her boutique gym where they apparently charge you extra for the oxygen. But when she looked at me, there was this flicker in her eyes. Annoyance, maybe? Calculation? I couldn't quite pin it down. I tried to be understanding. Marriage vows and all that, in sickness and in health, right? Even if sickness, in this case, meant I couldn't hear her complaining about her coworker Karen or her elaborate theories about which neighbor was definitely having an affair. She meant well, I kept telling myself. This was hard on her too. She'd signed up for a husband who could hear her detailed recaps of The Bachelor, not someone who just nodded blankly while reading her lips and getting about 40% of the actual message. Still, despite the communication barriers, the frustrated sighs, the way she'd sometimes throw her hands up and storm off when I misunderstood something, I believed she loved me. I really did. Call me naive, call me trusting, call me the world's biggest idiot, all valid options. That belief, that fundamental trust in our marriage, in her commitment, in the us we built over 3 years together, that lasted about 5 weeks. 5 weeks and one accidentally overheard conversation too long. Well, overheard is generous considering what happened, but we'll get to that. Let's just say that when your hearing suddenly decides to make a comeback, it picks the absolute worst moments to reintroduce you to sound. And what I heard, what I finally, clearly, undeniably heard, that didn't just break my heart. It shattered every assumption I'd made about my marriage, my wife, and the person I thought I'd chosen to spend my life with. Turns out, silence isn't always the enemy. Sometimes, what breaks the silence is so much worse. The first week home from the hospital was pure, unfiltered chaos. Picture this. A grown man trying to navigate his own house like he's suddenly been dropped into a foreign country where nobody speaks his language, except the foreign country is suburban Ohio and the language barrier is just his busted eardrums. I was attempting to adapt to my new reality, while Haley acted like my disability was a personal inconvenience specifically designed to ruin her carefully constructed aesthetic. You know the type I'm talking about, the Instagram wife. Every corner of our house was photographed, filtered, and posted with captions like, "Love conquers all, 2 hearts, #married life, #blessed beyond measure, #myrock." While in actual reality, she was treating me like a malfunctioning appliance she couldn't return because she'd thrown away the receipt. I used to think her social media obsession was funny, endearing even. We'd laugh about her staging the same coffee cup photo 17 different ways to get the perfect morning vibe. Now it just felt hollow. She'd literally step over me, literally, physically step over my body if I was sitting on the floor trying to plug in my phone, to get the right angle for her lazy Sunday post. The irony of calling it lazy while she spent 2 hours setting up the shot was not lost on me, even if my hearing was. Our house became a weird silent film where I was both the star and the audience, except nobody was laughing at the pratfalls. Haley started leaving notes everywhere, which sounds sweet until you realize that "take out trash," written in increasingly aggressive handwriting and underlined 3 times, isn't really a love letter. She'd text me from the same room we were both sitting in, her thumbs flying across her screen with this annoyed expression, like having to communicate with her disabled husband was equivalent to filing taxes by hand. Then there was her voice, or what I imagined her voice sounded like now, because I couldn't actually hear it. Her silent gestures, though? Those were loud. So incredibly loud. The eye rolls could have powered a wind turbine. The heavy sighs I could only see by watching her shoulders rise and fall with dramatic exasperation. The way she'd throw her hands up when I didn't understand what she was trying to communicate, like I'd chosen to go deaf just to spite her brunch plans. Haley's mom, Patricia, started visiting more often, which was about as welcome as a root canal. Without anesthesia. On a Monday, Patricia Montgomery Ashford, Yes, she hyphenated after her divorce because apparently one name wasn't enough to contain all that judgment, was elegant in that cold, calculated way that women who lunch at country clubs have perfected. She wore her privilege like armor. Designer pantsuits that cost more than my truck, shoes that could double as weapons, and this permanent expression that suggested she was constantly smelling something faintly unpleasant. Spoiler alert, that something was me. She'd arrive unannounced, naturally, because wealthy people seem to think doorbells and courtesy calls are for peasants. Patricia would glide into our living room with her overpriced latte, always from that boutique coffee place downtown that charged $8 for what was essentially coffee with an attitude, and settle into our best chair like she was holding court. Then the whispering would start. She and Haley would huddle together on the couch, heads bent close, hands gesturing, and I'd sit there in my recliner, the broken husband, the inconvenient obstacle to whatever conversation they were having. Here's what they didn't know. I'd been teaching myself to read lips. Not like some professional interpreter or anything, but YouTube is a hell of a resource when you've got nothing but time and a desperate need to understand what people are saying about you. I wasn't fluent, not even close, but I was getting better. Good enough to catch phrases. Good enough to see Patricia's perfectly lipstick mouth form words like dragging you down and should have standards. Good enough to watch Haley nod along like her mother was spitting profound wisdom instead of casual cruelty. "He's not the man you thought he was," Patricia said one afternoon, and I caught every word. She emphasized man, like it was a question, a doubt, a judgment wrapped in 4 letters. Haley's response was harder to catch, but I got trying and difficult, and something that looked like don't know how much longer. How much longer what? That's what kept me up at night, staring at our bedroom ceiling while Haley slept peacefully beside me, or scrolled through her phone, or did whatever she did while I pretended to sleep. How much longer could she tolerate being married to damaged goods? How much longer before she decided that her Instagram aesthetic didn't include a disabled husband who couldn't hear her recite her daily affirmations? Meanwhile, I played my role perfectly. The grateful husband. The one trying so hard to adapt. I'd smile when they looked at me, give a little wave, nod like everything was fine. I became a professional at looking pleasant and confused, like a golden retriever who wants to help but doesn't quite understand the assignment. Inside, though? Inside I was thinking things that would make a therapist reach for their prescription pad. Patricia would sip her fancy coffee, the kind with foam art that probably had its own Instagram account, and I'd watch her whisper to Haley. "You could have married someone successful," I caught one day. Not more successful, or as successful, just someone successful. Like I was currently operating at 0 on the achievement scale. Never mind that I ran my own contracting business. Never mind that I'd built our deck, renovated our kitchen, and fixed pretty much everything in our house and half the houses in our neighborhood. None of that mattered because I wasn't whatever Patricia's definition of successful looked like. Probably something involving golf club memberships and investment portfolios and weekend homes in places with pretentious names. Haley's face when her mother said these things, that's what killed me. She didn't defend me. Didn't shake her head or mouth. "That's not fair," or give any indication that she disagreed. She just sat there, nodding slightly, like she was considering the merits of her mother's argument. Like our marriage was a business proposition that wasn't yielding adequate returns. I started keeping a mental scorecard of every slight, every dismissive gesture, every moment of casual cruelty disguised as concern. Patricia suggesting Haley needed time to herself, to process everything. Translation: your husband's disability is traumatic for you. Haley sighing when I didn't understand something she tried to communicate. The way they'd both look at me sometimes, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. The worst part wasn't even the judgment, or the whispered conversations. It was the performance. Because when anyone else was around, Haley's friends, our neighbors, the mailman, she'd transform. Suddenly she was the devoted wife, the caretaker, the woman standing by her man through adversity. She'd touch my shoulder gently, smile with practiced sympathy, and tell everyone how we're managing. and taking it day by day, and keeping positive. She'd use words like journey and challenge and blessed for perspective. And people would nod admiringly, like she deserved a medal for not abandoning her husband during a medical crisis. If judgment were an Olympic sport, Patricia would have more gold medals than Michael Phelps. And Haley? She'd be her star pupil, training for the next games. Meanwhile, I sat there in the audience of my own life, watching them perform, reading their lips when they thought I couldn't, and slowly, methodically, realizing that the person I'd married maybe never existed at all. Maybe she'd always been this person, this woman who valued appearance over substance, who saw marriage as a social accessory rather than a partnership, and I'd just been too in love, too optimistic, too stupidly trusting to notice. So yeah, that first week home was chaos. But not the kind of chaos you recover from. The kind that fundamentally shifts how you see everything, like putting on glasses for the first time and realizing the world was never actually blurry, you were just blind. Haley's behavior started changing around week 3, and I'm not talking about the normal adjustment period kind of changing. I mean the kind of shift that makes you wonder if someone's been replaced by a pod person, except this version was somehow worse than the original. No more post-it notes saying, "Love you," stuck to the bathroom mirror. No more hand squeezes when we passed each other in the hallway. She stopped facing me when she talked, which made lip reading absolutely impossible, and I'm pretty sure that was intentional. It was like she'd decided that basic human courtesy was optional now that I couldn't call her out on it verbally. The most obvious tell? Her phone. That thing became like a fifth limb, surgically attached to her hand. She was glued to it 24/7, and I mean that literally. Morning coffee? Phone. Dinner table? Phone. Bathroom? You better believe she had that phone. She'd be sitting 3 feet away from me on the couch, and I'd see her face light up with notifications. Not the casual, "oh, a text," kind of lighting up. The full-on dopamine hit, eyes sparkling, corners of her mouth twitching into smiles she tried to suppress. She'd be laughing at something on that screen, actually giggling, and when I'd tap her shoulder to ask what was funny, she'd flip the phone over so fast you'd think it was displaying nuclear launch codes. "Just the girls," she'd mouth to me, waving dismissively. "Group chat." Right. Because group chats with Jennifer and Melissa about their kids' soccer schedules definitely make you blush like a teenager who just got asked to prom. I wasn't born yesterday, and I definitely wasn't stupid, hearing loss or not. Either she'd found the world's most entertaining group of girlfriends, or there was a new contestant in her romantic reality show, and spoiler alert, it wasn't me. I started paying attention to patterns, because that's what you do when you can't hear but you can definitely see. Every evening around 8 p.m., like clockwork, she'd excuse herself. "Need to call my mom." She'd sign, or "work emergency," which was hilarious because Haley worked part-time at a boutique selling overpriced candles. What emergency? Did someone buy the wrong scent? Was there a lavender crisis I didn't know about? She'd disappear into our bedroom, close the door, and stay there for 30, 45 minutes sometimes. When she'd come back out, her cheeks would be flushed, her eyes bright, and she'd have this satisfied look like she'd just finished the best conversation of her life. That conversation definitely wasn't with me, in case you were wondering. Our conversations consisted of her typing, "Did you eat?" and me giving a thumbs up. Real romantic stuff. The kind of deep connection that makes marriage counselors weep with joy. Then came the perfume incident, and let me tell you, this is where things went from suspicious to, "Okay, we're definitely in affair territory now." It was a Tuesday night, I remember, because Tuesdays were trash night, and I'd just dragged our bins to the curb. I came back inside, still in my jacket, and Haley was in the kitchen doing her usual phone scrolling routine. I walked up behind her to grab a water from the fridge, and when I passed her, this scent hit me like a freight train. Now I've been married to this woman for 3 years. I know her perfume collection better than I know the periodic table. She's got her daytime casual scent, her evening out scent, her "I'm trying to impress someone" scent, and her It's Sunday and I don't care. Nonsense. This? This was none of those. This was something new, something expensive smelling, something that screamed, I'm trying really hard here. It was musky and sweet and definitely not from her usual rotation of flower-based fragrances that cost $40 at Macy's. I hugged her from behind, partly because I was still playing the devoted husband role, partly because I wanted to confirm what I was smelling. She tensed up immediately, like I'd caught her doing something wrong, which, let's be honest, I probably had. When she turned around, I pointed to my nose and then to her, the universal sign for, you smell different. She shrugged it off with this casual wave, her lips forming the words, just trying something new. Then she added, like it? With this fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. The smile that said, please don't ask follow-up questions. Yeah, sure, Haley. You just randomly decided to upgrade your entire perfume game on a random Tuesday. That's totally normal behavior for someone who's been wearing the same Bath and Body Works scent since college. Here's what really got me. The perfume wasn't the only new thing. Her clothes started changing too. More effort, more style, more. I'm definitely dressing for someone. Energy. She'd always been put together. That Instagram aesthetic didn't maintain itself, but this was different. New lingerie started appearing in her drawers, the fancy kind with tags from stores I couldn't afford. Her gym sessions got longer. Her hair appointments more frequent. She was getting waxed, threaded, manicured, and pedicured like she was preparing for a photo shoot, except we had exactly 0 events on our calendar. Girls' night. She'd tell me when she'd come home at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, smelling like wine and that mysterious new perfume. Jennifer's birthday thing. When it definitely wasn't Jennifer's birthday because I'd seen Jennifer 3 days earlier at the grocery store, and she'd mentioned nothing about celebrations. The lies were piling up faster than our credit card bills, which, by the way, were also suddenly through the roof. Restaurants I'd never been to. Charges from hotels in the next town over. A lingerie store called Lace and Grace that sounded like it specialized in helping wives commit adultery in style. That's when I started the notebook. Small, black, leather-bound. I picked it up from the office supply store on one of my solo trips out of the house, the kind of trips I'd started taking more frequently because being home felt like living in a museum of my failed marriage. Every weird thing she did went in that notebook. Every unexplained absence, every suspicious charge, every time she came home smelling like guilt wrapped in designer fragrance. If Sherlock Holmes and a broken-hearted husband had a baby, and that baby was really petty and detail-oriented, that was me. I documented everything. March 15th, gone for 3 hours, said grocery shopping, came back with 1 bag of lettuce and lipstick smudged. March 18th, new charge at Winston Hotel, $347. We don't know anyone in Winston. March 22nd, laughed at phone for 10 minutes straight. Hit screen when I approached, claimed it was a meme. No one laughs at memes for 10 minutes. I kept that notebook in my truck, hidden under the driver's seat in a compartment I'd built myself. Because here's what I was learning: when you can't hear, you get real good at seeing. And what I was seeing was a woman who'd checked out of our marriage and was actively auditioning replacements. The perfume wasn't just perfume. It was evidence. The phone wasn't just a phone. It was a portal to whatever life she was building without me. And me? I was the obstacle she was trying to work around, the inconvenient husband who couldn't hear her lies but could definitely smell them. So yeah, suspicion doesn't even cover it. I was living with a stranger who wore my wife's face and spent my money and slept in my bed while clearly wishing she was somewhere else. The sweet smell wasn't perfume. It was betrayal, and it was everywhere. Patricia started visiting more often, and by more often, I mean she was practically living at our house. Always unannounced, naturally, because people with money seem to think that common courtesy is something poor people invented to feel important. She'd show up at 9 in the morning with her ridiculous coffee and her designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, letting herself in with the spare key Haley had given her without asking me. That spare key was supposed to be for emergencies, but apparently. I need to gossip about my son-in-law. Qualified as a crisis in Patricia's world. One afternoon, I was in the garage pretending to organize my tools but actually just hiding from the tension in my own house. Through the window, I could see them in the living room, Patricia perched on the edge of our couch like she was afraid the fabric might contaminate her $1,000 pants, and Haley sitting cross-legged across from her. Their heads were bent together in that conspiratorial way that makes your stomach drop even when you don't know what they're saying. But here's the thing, I was getting better at lip reading. A lot better. YouTube tutorials, practice with TV shows, and pure desperation had turned me into a decent amateur detective. I moved closer to the window, staying in the shadows of the garage where they couldn't see me. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Patricia's lips moved, and I caught it clear as day. "He doesn't suspect anything," Haley responded, and I had to piece it together from the words I could make out. "Too trusting, always has been." Then Patricia laughed, that cold, champagne-sipping laugh that probably made waiters nervous. She said something else, and I caught the word, she, repeated twice. "She doesn't know, she's clueless." "Wait. She?" They were talking about someone else, some third person in whatever scheme they were cooking up. Except they kept glancing in my direction, toward the garage, and something clicked in my brain like a puzzle piece snapping into place. They were calling me she. Not because they thought I was a woman, but because they were talking about me like I wasn't even human enough to deserve a proper pronoun. I was just she. Some abstract problem they needed to solve, some obstacle in their way. My hands clenched around the wrench I was holding. "She's too trusting," Haley had said. Not he. Not Liam. Just she. Like I was a character in their story instead of a real person with feelings and a name, and a marriage that was apparently dissolving while I stood there watching through a garage window. Patricia leaned back, crossing her legs in that way wealthy women do when they're about to say something particularly cruel. Her mouth moved. "When are you going to?" And I lost the rest, but Haley's response was clear enough. She nodded, said something that looked like soon, and "Can't wait much longer." Can't wait for what? What were they planning? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Divorce? That seemed obvious, but the secrecy suggested something more. Were they planning to have me declared incompetent? Take control of my business? My accounts? I'd built my contracting company from nothing, worked my ass off for 15 years to establish a reputation and a client base, and now what? Patricia thought her daughter deserved half of it just for showing up. I watched them for another 10 minutes, catching fragments. The lawyer said, "Needs to sign." "Won't be a problem." They were talking legal strategy. They had a lawyer. This wasn't just casual complaining about the disappointing husband. This was coordinated. This was planned. This was a heist, except instead of stealing diamonds, they were stealing my life. From that moment, something shifted in me. The hurt, the betrayal, the anger, all of it crystallized into something cold and sharp and calculating. If they wanted to play games, fine. But they were playing with someone who'd spent the last 3 weeks learning to survive in silence, learning to observe, learning to see things other people missed. They thought I was helpless? Clueless? Too trusting? Perfect. Let them think that. I became the world's best actor. When I walked back into the house, I made sure my face showed nothing but confused affection. Patricia looked at me with that pitying smile, the one that said, "You poor, broken thing." And I smiled back like a golden retriever who just wants approval. Haley patted the couch next to her, and I sat down obediently, nodding along while they had conversations I pretended not to follow. But I was following every word now. Every gesture. Every glance they exchanged that they thought I couldn't interpret. Patricia would say things like, "It'll all work out," while looking at Haley meaningfully, and Haley would nod with this expression that was half excitement, half nervousness. They'd show me papers sometimes, documents that Patricia would produce from her expensive bag, pointing at signature lines and smiling encouragingly. I'd squint at them, pretending to read slowly, pretending to be confused by the legal language. "What is?" I'd mouth, pointing at random paragraphs. Haley would wave dismissively, type on her phone. "Just refinancing stuff. Normal paperwork. Don't worry about it." And I'd nod trustingly, sign my name where they pointed, playing the part of the disabled husband who couldn't possibly understand complex financial matters. Here's what they didn't know. I was photographing every document with my phone before I signed it. Every single one. I'd excuse myself to go to the bathroom, snap pictures, save them to a cloud account they didn't know existed. Some of those papers were legitimate refinancing documents. Others? Those were power of attorney forms. Asset transfer agreements. Documents that would essentially give Haley control over everything I owned. But I wasn't signing the real ones. Oh no. I'd become real friendly with my printer and some blank paper. The documents I actually signed were worthless copies I'd made, identical except for one tiny detail in the footer, a different form number, a subtle change in the legal code citation. Things a lawyer would catch immediately if they ever tried to file them, but things Patricia and Haley would never notice. The real documents? Those stayed unsigned, hidden in a safety deposit box at a bank across town that I'd opened using an old friend as my driver. If silence was my prison, it had also become my camouflage. They talked freely around me now, not even bothering to whisper half the time. They thought the deaf guy couldn't participate in conversations, couldn't understand subtext, couldn't piece together a conspiracy happening right in front of his face. They'd gotten comfortable, sloppy even. Patricia would say things like, "Once this is finalized," and, "when you're free of this burden," right there in my living room, barely 3 feet away from where I sat pretending to watch TV with subtitles. The rage I felt was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Not hot, explosive anger, that would have given me away. This was ice-cold fury, the kind that keeps you up at night planning and thinking and preparing. My wife and her mother were actively plotting to destroy my life, steal my assets, and apparently they found it so easy, so justified, that they could laugh about it over $8 lattes in my own house. Every evening, after Haley went to bed, I'd sit in my truck in the driveway and update my black notebook. New entries about their meetings with lawyers, about documents they tried to get me to sign, about conversations I'd lip-read through windows and around corners. I was building a case, collecting evidence, preparing for a war they didn't even know was coming. Because here's what Patricia and Haley hadn't counted on. I wasn't just some trusting idiot who'd roll over and let them ruin me. I was a man who'd built a business through recessions and competition, who'd survived on construction sites where one mistake could kill you, who'd learned to read situations and people because that's how you stay alive in the real world. They wanted me to be helpless? Fine. I'd be helpless right up until the moment I wasn't. And when that moment came, when I finally played my hand, they were going to realize they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated the man they were trying to destroy. Week 5 arrived like a plot twist I didn't see coming, which is saying something considering I'd been living in my own personal thriller movie for a month. My follow-up appointment with Dr. Patel was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, one of those gorgeous spring afternoons where the weather makes you forget that your life is actively falling apart. Haley offered to drive me. Well, offered is generous. She typed, "I'll take you," on her phone with all the enthusiasm of someone volunteering for a colonoscopy. I declined, told her I'd Uber, which clearly relieved her because she had things to do. Yeah, I bet she did. Probably things that involved her phone, that mysterious perfume, and a whole lot of lying. Dr. Patel's office was in one of those medical buildings that always smells like antiseptic and broken dreams. I'd been there enough times over the past 5 weeks that the receptionist knew me by sight, giving me that sympathetic head tilt that medical professionals must learn in school. "Mr. Carter, you can go right back. Room 3. I followed the nurse down the hallway, past examination rooms where other people were dealing with their own problems, probably none of which involved their wives plotting financial ruin with their monster-in-law. Dr. Patel came in 10 minutes later, all business with her tablet and her professional smile. She was probably in her mid-40s, sharp as hell, with this no-nonsense attitude I'd always appreciated. She didn't do pity, didn't do false hope. Just straight facts, which in my current situation was refreshing. Everyone else in my life was lying to me. Nice to have at least one person committed to honesty. "How are you managing, Liam?" she asked, and I watched her lips form each word clearly. I'd gotten good at reading her specifically because she enunciated well, probably from years of talking to patients with hearing problems. I shrugged, gave her the thumbs-up gesture that had become my default response to everything. Fine. Always fine. Fine like a building that's on fire, but this is fine. Dog is still sitting there drinking coffee. She pulled up my chart on her tablet, scrolling through test results and notes with this focused expression. Then she looked up at me, and something in her face changed. Not quite a smile, but close. Something warmer, more optimistic. "Liam, I have good news. Really good news." My heart started doing this weird stuttering thing. Good news in a doctor's office felt like a myth, a unicorn, something that happened to other people in feel-good movies but never in real life. She set down the tablet and looked me straight in the eyes, speaking slowly and clearly so I could read every word. "Your hearing is returning." I just stared at her. Those 4 words didn't compute. Couldn't compute. My brain had spent 5 weeks accepting that silence was my new normal, that I'd be reading lips and using phone apps and missing out on conversations for the rest of my life. Hearing returning? That was the temporary part everyone had promised but nobody actually believed. "Are you serious?" I mouthed, probably looking like I'd just been told I'd won the lottery, which honestly wasn't that far off. Dr. Patel nodded, pulling out this tuning fork thing that I recognized from previous tests. "The inflammation in your inner ear has decreased significantly. The trauma is healing faster than we anticipated. I want to test your hearing now, see where we're at." What happened next felt like that scene in every movie where the deaf person hears for the first time, except this was real and I wasn't crying. I was too shocked to cry. Dr. Patel struck the tuning fork and held it near my right ear. Nothing at first, just a familiar void. Then, and I swear this moment is burned into my brain forever, I heard it. Faint, distant, like someone playing a note in another room, but there. Actually there. I heard that. I said out loud, and holy shit, I could hear my own voice. Muffled, weird, like listening to a recording of yourself that sounds wrong but is definitely you. I can hear my voice. Dr. Patel was grinning now, the kind of genuine smile doctors probably don't get to use often enough. "Your right ear is recovering faster than your left, but both are showing significant improvement. I'd estimate you're at about 40% capacity now, and it should continue improving over the next few weeks." She did more tests, playing sounds through headphones, making me identify tones and frequencies. Every beep I could hear, every word I could distinguish, felt like getting pieces of myself back. She pulled out her pen, clicked it a few times. I heard it. The click of a pen. Something so ordinary, so mundane, that I'd never appreciated it before. The fluorescent lights above us had this faint buzzing that apparently they'd always made. The air conditioning hummed. Her tablet made little notification sounds. The world wasn't silent anymore. "This is incredible," I said, and I could hear myself saying it, could hear the emotion in my own voice. "When will it be back completely?" "Hard to say exactly. Could be days, could be a few weeks. Everyone's different. But the trajectory looks excellent, Liam. You're healing." She paused, then added with a professional tone that couldn't quite hide her excitement. "Don't tell anyone yet. Give your ears time to adjust. Too much stimulation too fast could cause setbacks." And right then, right in that exact moment, a thought hit me like a sledgehammer wrapped in opportunity. She wanted me to keep quiet about my recovery. For medical reasons, sure, but the implications were so much bigger than audiology. If nobody knew my hearing was coming back, if Haley and Patricia thought I was still deaf, still helpless, still the clueless husband they could manipulate and scheme around. "Don't tell anyone?" I repeated, making sure I understood correctly. Dr. Patel nodded. Give it a week or two. Let your auditory system readjust gradually. You'll want to avoid loud noises, crowded places. Take it easy. Or, I thought, give my wife enough rope to hang herself with. Give her and her scheming mother enough confidence to get sloppy, to say things they shouldn't, to reveal the full extent of whatever they were planning. If they thought I still couldn't hear, they'd keep talking. Keep plotting. Keep digging their own graves deeper while I stood there with a shovel, pretending to be confused about what graves were for. I won't tell anyone. I promised Dr. Patel, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Medical recovery, taking it slow, I understand completely. She walked me through care instructions, things to avoid, follow-up appointments. I heard every word, and each one felt like a gift. But more than that, each word felt like ammunition. I drove home in my truck with the windows down, and for the first time in 5 weeks, I could hear the wind. Traffic sounds. Other cars' radios bleeding through their windows. The world had volume again, and it was the most beautiful, terrible thing. When I got home, Haley was in the kitchen on her phone. Shocking, I know. She looked up when I walked in, and I made sure my face showed nothing. Just the same confused, dependent expression I'd been wearing for weeks. She typed on her phone. How was appointment? I gave her a thumbs up, shrugged like nothing had changed. She nodded, already looking back at her screen, already dismissing me. She had no idea that everything had changed. That the power dynamic she'd been exploiting had just shifted completely. That her deaf, helpless, trusting husband could suddenly hear every word, every plan, every betrayal she thought she was hiding. Patricia called right then. I could hear the phone ring, could hear Haley's voice when she answered. Hey, Mom. Those 2 words sounded different than I'd imagined during 5 weeks of silence. Sharper. Faker. She walked toward the bedroom, but not before I heard her say, No, nothing new. He's still completely clueless. Clueless. Right. I smiled to myself, said nothing, and went to update my black notebook with the most important entry yet. Day 35, hearing returned. They don't know. Game on. The next morning started like any other disaster disguised as normalcy. I woke up at 6 a.m., Haley still asleep beside me, her phone charging on the nightstand like it was receiving life support. For 5 weeks, mornings had been silent rituals of coffee and avoidance. Now, with my hearing partially back, I could hear everything. The house settling. The refrigerator humming downstairs. Birds outside that apparently had been chirping this whole time. And most importantly, I could hear when Haley's alarm went off at 7 and she slapped it quiet with the enthusiasm of someone who definitely didn't want to be conscious. I pretended to still be asleep, kept my breathing steady and slow like I'd perfected over the weeks of living with someone I no longer trusted. She shuffled around the bedroom, and I heard every drawer open, every zipper zip, every footstep on our hardwood floors that creaked in 3 specific spots I'd been meaning to fix but now felt grateful for because they were like an early warning system. She went downstairs, and I gave it 5 minutes before following. Played my part perfectly, confused morning face, slight stumble on the stairs like my balance was still off from the accident. When I got to the kitchen, she was already on her phone, coffee brewing, wearing yoga pants that cost more than my power tools. She glanced up, gave me that obligatory smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes, then went back to scrolling. I poured myself coffee, and here's where having hearing back became its own special torture. I could hear her typing. The rapid-fire tap-tap-tap of her thumbs on the screen, the little swoosh sound when she sent messages, the giggles she tried to suppress when something came back. Every sound was evidence. Every noise was confirmation that my wife was having a whole entire relationship with someone else right in front of me. Then her phone rang. Not buzzed, rang. Loud and clear, some pop song I vaguely recognized as her ringtone. She looked at the screen, and her whole face changed. Brightened. Excited. She glanced at me, probably to confirm I couldn't hear it, then answered. Hey, Mom, she said, and I heard every syllable crystal clear. She walked toward the living room, but she wasn't being careful about distance. Why would she? Her husband was deaf. Couldn't hear a thing. She settled onto the couch, and I stayed in the kitchen, positioned where I could hear but look occupied with my breakfast. Just a clueless guy eating cereal, nothing to see here. "I'm tired of pretending, Mom," Haley said, and my spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. "He's like dead weight now. He can't hear a thing. Honestly, it's peaceful." Dead weight. She called me dead weight. I'd built her that custom closet she'd begged for. Renovated our entire kitchen. Fixed her car more times than I could count. But sure, dead weight. That tracked. Patricia's voice came through the phone, tinny but audible if I focused. "I told you not to marry him, sweetheart. You need someone who matches your lifestyle, not a handyman husband." Handyman husband. Like that was an insult. Like having actual skills and the ability to fix things made me somehow less than whatever trust fund losers Patricia considered acceptable. My blood was heating up, my heart pounding so hard I was surprised they couldn't hear it in the living room. "I know," Haley said, and she sounded tired. Defeated. Like being married to me was this enormous burden she'd been carrying. "It's just so much work, you know? The notes, the typing, having to explain everything. And he's just there. All the time. Just sitting there with that grateful look on his face like I'm some kind of saint for not abandoning him." "You are a saint," Patricia said. "Most women would have left by now." Most women. As if staying with your husband after an accident was some kind of heroic act deserving awards. As if marriage vows were suggestions rather than promises. For better or worse, in sickness and health, apparently those were just pretty words for the wedding and not actual commitments. Then Haley said it. The sentence that took every piece of hurt and betrayal I'd been feeling and crystallized it into something sharp enough to cut. "Sometimes I think about what life would have been like if I'd married Kyle." Kyle. Her ex-boyfriend. The guy who'd proposed to her before I did, the walking hair gel advertisement who worked in cryptocurrency, which was code for scam people on the internet. Kyle with his gym membership he treated like a religion and his LinkedIn profile full of motivational quotes about grinding and hustling. Kyle who'd cheated on her with her own cousin, but apparently that was a forgivable offense compared to the cardinal sin of losing your hearing in an accident. My hands gripped the edge of the counter so hard I thought the granite might crack. Life with Kyle. She was fantasizing about life with Kyle while I sat in our house, eating cereal, pretending to be deaf so I could gather evidence of her betrayal. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Patricia didn't even pause. Didn't say, "That's inappropriate," or, "You're married," or any of the things a mother should say when her daughter is discussing alternative life choices with her ex while her current husband is 20 feet away. Instead, she said, "At least Kyle had ambition. Drive. He understood what it meant to be successful." Ambition. Kyle's ambition had been to start 3 different businesses that all failed within 6 months. Drive. The only thing Kyle drove was a leased BMW he couldn't actually afford. Success. Kyle's version of success was posting gym selfies and pretending his life was more impressive than it actually was. But sure, he had more ambition than the guy who'd built a legitimate contracting business from nothing and owned his house outright. "The lawyer says we're almost ready," Patricia continued, and my entire body went rigid. "The papers are nearly finalized. Once he signs the last few documents, you'll have control of everything. The business, the accounts, the house. Then you can do what you need to do." Do what she needed to do. Which was what, exactly? Divorce me and take everything I'd worked for? Leave me with nothing while she ran off to chase her Kyle fantasy? My vision was actually blurring with rage. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was calculated, premeditated financial destruction with her mother as the architect and me as the clueless Mark who was supposed to just sign away his entire life. "He trusts me completely," Haley said, and she actually laughed. Actually laughed. "He signs whatever I put in front of him. Doesn't even read it properly. Just trusts that I have his best interests at heart. Past tense, sweetheart. Past tense. I trusted you. Before I heard you call me dead weight. Before I heard you fantasize about your scam artist ex. Before I heard you laughing about manipulating me with your sociopath mother. They talked for another 10 minutes, discussing timelines and logistics and lawyer meetings. They talked about selling the house, splitting assets, how much my business was worth, and whether they should try to take it all or settle for half. They discussed me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed, a thing rather than a person. And through it all, I stood there in my kitchen, listening to my marriage disintegrate in real time while my coffee got cold. When Haley finally hung up, she sat there for a minute. I could hear her breathing, hear her moving around on the couch. Then she got up and walked back to the kitchen with this smile plastered on her face, the mask firmly back in place. She held up her phone, typed, "Want to go out for lunch later?" I looked at her standing there, pretending to be the caring wife, and something inside me went completely cold. Not angry cold. Strategic cold. The kind of cold that makes good decisions instead of emotional ones. I smiled, nodded, gave her the thumbs up. "Sure, honey. Let's go to lunch. Let's keep pretending everything is fine while you plot to destroy my life with your mother. Let's keep playing this game where you think you're the only one who knows the rules." She seemed satisfied, went back to her phone, probably texting Kyle or her lawyer or whoever else was on her betrayal speed dial. And I stood there, listening to every notification sound, every keyboard tap, every little noise that confirmed what I already knew. My wife didn't love me. Maybe she never had. Maybe I'd been dead weight from the start, just too stupid and trusting to see it. But I saw it now. Heard it now. Understood it with perfect, painful clarity. And I was going to make absolutely sure she regretted ever thinking I was someone she could destroy. That afternoon, while Haley and Patricia went out for what they called shopping, but what I now understood was probably scheming at expensive cafes, I went full Jason Bourne on my own life. The house was mine for 3 glorious hours, and I was going to use every single minute. First stop, voice recorders. I'd ordered 2 of them online a week ago when I was still in my gathering evidence phase, back when I thought maybe I was being paranoid and this would all blow over. Cute. Past Liam was adorably naive. These weren't your average recorders either. These were the good stuff, voice-activated, 12-hour battery life, small enough to hide anywhere. The kind private investigators use, which I knew because I'd spent an entire evening researching this exact scenario on Reddit forums where other suspicious spouses shared their stories. I planted the first one in the kitchen, tucked behind the decorative bowl of fake lemons that Haley insisted made the space pop. Nobody had touched that bowl in 2 years. It was the perfect spot, central location, picked up conversations from the living room and dining area, and completely invisible unless you were specifically looking for surveillance equipment, which Haley definitely wasn't because she thought her husband couldn't hear. The second recorder went in the living room, wedged behind the picture frame of our wedding photo. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our smiling faces from 3 years ago, back when I thought I was marrying someone who actually loved me, now serving as cover for the device that would record her plotting my destruction. If that wasn't poetic justice, I don't know what was. With the audio surveillance in place, I moved to Phase 2, financial protection. This was the part that would have made my accountant proud if I'd told him about it, which I wasn't going to because the fewer people who knew about this, the better. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our joint accounts, the ones Haley thought gave her access to everything. Here's what she didn't know: I'd been slowly, carefully, moving money for the past 2 weeks. Not all of it, nothing that would trigger alerts or seem suspicious. Just gradual transfers to a new account I'd opened at a completely different bank across town, one that existed solely under my name with paperwork Haley had never seen. Every time she went out, every time she was in the shower, every time she was glued to her phone texting whoever the hell she was texting, I'd transfer another couple thousand. 500 here, 2,000 there. Small enough to blend in with regular expenses, large enough that I was building a substantial safety net. Our joint checking account that used to have $43,000? Now it had about 12,000. The rest was in an account at First National under LC Holdings, a small LLC I'd registered using my friend Derek as the initial point of contact. Derek, who ran a construction supply company and owed me about 17 favors, had been happy to help when I'd explained I needed some financial privacy, without going into details. Good guy, Derek. Didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just did the paperwork. The savings account got the same treatment. Investment accounts? Those were trickier because they had penalties for early withdrawal, but I'd started the process of rolling them over to individual accounts that Haley couldn't touch. My business accounts were already separate, thank God, because I'd set those up before we got married when my lawyer had insisted on keeping business and personal finances completely separate. Future Liam owed past Liam's lawyer a very expensive bottle of whiskey. Joint credit cards? I'd already requested new cards be sent to a P.O. box I'd rented 2 weeks ago. Changed all the passwords to accounts, set up two-factor authentication on my phone that Haley couldn't access. Every digital footprint that connected our finances was being systematically severed, and she had no clue because she never actually looked at the accounts. She just spent the money and assumed it would always be there. Next up, the documents. Those precious papers that Patricia kept producing from her designer handbag, the ones they'd been so eager to get me to sign. I photographed every single one I could find. Haley kept them in her desk drawer, probably thinking they were secure because her deaf husband wouldn't go snooping. I found power of attorney forms, asset transfer agreements, something that looked suspiciously like a quitclaim deed for the house, and my personal favorite, a document that would have given Haley sole ownership of my business. My business. The one I'd built from scratch 15 years ago when I was 23 with nothing but a truck, some tools, and a work ethic that Patricia apparently thought was beneath her daughter. They wanted to take that? The company that had my name on it, my reputation, my blood and sweat and 16-hour days? Over my dead body. Actually, scratch that, over their dead reputations. I made copies of everything, saved them to 3 different cloud accounts with passwords that would take a supercomputer 1,000 years to crack. Then I did something that felt both petty and absolutely necessary. I made fake versions of the documents I hadn't signed yet. Same format, same fonts, same everything except for tiny details in the legal code citations that would make them completely invalid if anyone tried to file them. The real genius move? I'd already signed some of these fake documents weeks ago when I'd first gotten suspicious. When Haley thought she was watching me sign over my power of attorney, I was actually signing a worthless piece of paper that looked identical but had Form 2847B instead of Form 2847A in the footer. Would a lawyer catch it? Immediately. Would Haley or Patricia notice? Not a chance. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their manipulation skills to actually verify the documents were legitimate. I spent another hour going through Haley's desk, looking for anything else that might be useful. Found printed emails from someone named Kyle_crypto. Oh, look who's back in the picture. The emails were exactly what you'd expect, lots of "I miss you," and "We should have never broken up," and my personal favorite, "Your husband sounds like a loser. Kyle, buddy, at least this loser owns his house. Pretty sure you're still in that studio apartment your parents are helping you pay for."
There were also printed texts between Haley and Patricia, which was weird because who prints texts? Apparently people planning to use them as evidence in divorce proceedings, that's who. They detailed their whole strategy. Wait until Liam signs everything, file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Take the house and the business. Leave him with whatever scraps the lawyer couldn't claim. There was even a timeline. They were aiming for next month. 4 weeks from now, they planned to drop the bomb. I photographed all of it. Every email, every text, every scheming little note Patricia had written in her pretentious handwriting about maximizing asset recovery. The evidence folder on my phone was getting thick, and I was getting angrier. But it was controlled anger now, the useful kind. The kind that makes you strategic instead of stupid. By the time I heard Haley's car pull into the driveway 3 hours later, everything was back exactly where I'd found it. The recorders were hidden and running. The money was moved. The documents were copied and the fakes were in place. I was sitting on the couch watching TV with subtitles on, looking for all the world like the helpless, clueless husband who'd spent the afternoon doing absolutely nothing productive. Haley came in loaded with shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford even during my best months. She was glowing, happy, probably high on the excitement of spending money she thought she was about to have unlimited access to. She showed me her purchases: clothes, shoes, some decorative thing for the bathroom that cost $200 and looked like something you'd find at a garage sale. I smiled and nodded, gave her encouraging thumbs up, played the supportive husband role one more time. She had no idea that while she was out shopping for her post-divorce wardrobe, I'd been systematically dismantling her entire plan. That every word she'd spoken this morning was recorded and backed up in multiple locations. That her fake signed documents were worthless. That the money she thought she'd be getting was already gone, legally transferred to accounts she didn't know existed. If Haley thought she was playing chess while I played checkers, she was about to find out we weren't even playing the same game. She was playing chess. I was playing four-dimensional psychological warfare, and I'd already won 3 moves ago. She just didn't know it yet. That night, lying in bed next to her while she scrolled through her phone, probably texting Kyle about their future together, I listened to everything. Every notification, every typing sound, every little digital noise that confirmed my wife had checked out of our marriage. And I smiled in the darkness, because tomorrow I'd check the recordings, gather more evidence, tighten the net a little more. Let her think she was winning. Villains always get a standing ovation before the curtain falls, and Haley's curtain call was coming real soon. The next evening, Haley decided to cook dinner, and by cook, I mean she ordered takeout from that overpriced Italian place downtown and transferred it onto our wedding china like she'd spent hours slaving over a hot stove. I watched her plate the pasta with this concentrated expression, arranging basil leaves like she was competing on some cooking show. The performance was almost impressive. She even turned on the stove for a few minutes to make the kitchen smell like something had actually been prepared here. "Dinner's ready," she said, her voice carrying that fake cheerfulness I'd become intimately familiar with. I could hear every syllable now, every forced note of enthusiasm. My hearing was probably at 60% capacity, good enough to catch conversations, phone calls, and all the lies that came with them. I sat down at the table, and she served me with this smile that would have fooled me 6 weeks ago. Would have made me think I had a caring wife who gave a damn about anything other than my bank account. She'd even lit candles, the expensive ones from her boutique that smelled like autumn harvest or whatever marketing nonsense they called it. "Mom thinks we should renovate," she said, twirling pasta on her fork with practiced elegance. She'd taken those etiquette classes Patricia insisted on, learned to eat like she was at a country club even though she'd grown up solidly middle class in a suburb where the biggest controversy was whose lawn looked better. I watched her lips form the words, pretended I was reading them instead of hearing them clearly. "She thinks we could get great value if we updated the kitchen and bathrooms. Maybe sell the house, move somewhere new. Fresh start, you know? Fresh start. Right. More like fresh bank account after she liquidated everything I owned." I nodded slowly, gave her my best confused but trusting expression, mouthed the word, "okay," like I was considering it, like I thought this was actually about home improvement and not about converting my assets into cash she could split with her lawyer. "You trust me, right?" she asked, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her touch felt like ice despite the warmth of her skin. "I just want what's best for us. For our future. Our future. The one that apparently involved Kyle and his cryptocurrency schemes. The future where I was supposed to be left with nothing while she rode off into the sunset with her trust fund wannabe ex-boyfriend." I squeezed her hand back, smiled like an idiot, played my role perfectly. Her phone rang mid-dinner, Patricia's name lighting up the screen. Haley glanced at me, checking if I could hear it, which of course she thought I couldn't, then answered without even excusing herself. "Hey, Mom," she said, not bothering to leave the table because why would she? Her deaf husband was right there, completely oblivious, no threat whatsoever. "Just having dinner," Haley continued, stabbing at her pasta. "Yeah, he's right here. No, I told you, he trusts me completely." Meanwhile, my voice recorder, the one I'd hidden behind that decorative vase in the center of the table, tucked right behind the fake flowers Haley had insisted would bring life to the space, was capturing every single word. The irony of her talking about betraying me while sitting 2 feet from surveillance equipment was almost poetic. The papers are ready. Patricia's voice came through the phone, tinny but clear enough. Benjamin said we can finalize everything by next week. He just needs those last 2 signatures. Benjamin, that must be the lawyer. Probably some sleazy divorce attorney who specialized in screwing over unsuspecting husbands. I made a mental note to look up every Benjamin who practiced family law in our county. Shouldn't be too hard. Small town, limited options, and I had nothing but time and motivation. Haley's eyes flicked to me, checking if I was paying attention. I was staring at my plate, moving pasta around with my fork like a kindergartner who didn't want to eat his vegetables. Harmless, clueless, definitely not listening to every word of this incriminating conversation. He'll sign anything, Haley said, and she actually giggled. Giggled like this was funny, like manipulating your husband was some kind of joke you shared with your mother over wine. Yesterday, he signed that refinancing document without even reading past the first paragraph. He just trusts that I have his best interests at heart. Had. Past tense, sweetheart. I had my fork halfway to my mouth, frozen there, listening to my wife laugh about deceiving me. The recorder was getting all of this. Every laugh, every conspiratorial whisper, every casual mention of fraud and manipulation. The business is the tricky part, Patricia said, her voice taking on that strategic tone she used when discussing things she thought were complicated but really weren't. Benjamin thinks we should go for full ownership rather than trying to split it. Apparently, it's easier legally, and Liam won't be able to run it effectively anyway with his condition. My condition. My temporary hearing loss that was almost completely healed, but they didn't know that because I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut and my ears open. They were planning to take my business, the one I'd built from nothing, the one that bore my name and reputation, because they thought I was too disabled to run it. The audacity was almost impressive. What about Kyle? Haley asked, and my hand tightened on my fork. Does he need to stay out of sight until this is finalized? Stay out of sight. So Kyle was involved, actively involved, not just some fantasy she was entertaining in her head. He was probably waiting in the wings like an understudy ready to take the stage once they'd successfully destroyed my life. Benjamin says it's better if there's no evidence of a relationship before the divorce, Patricia replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Keep it quiet for another month, then you're free. Free to live the life you deserve, sweetheart. The life she deserved. With my money, in my house that she wanted to sell, with my business that she wanted to steal, alongside a man who'd already proven he couldn't be faithful. Yeah, that sounded like exactly what she deserved, though probably not in the way Patricia meant it. They talked logistics for another 5 minutes. Timelines, lawyer meetings, what furniture Haley wanted to keep and what she wanted to sell. They discussed me like I was already gone, already removed from the equation, already just a signature on papers that would transfer everything I'd worked for into her name. When Haley finally hung up, she looked at me with this bright smile, the mask firmly back in place. Sorry about that. Mom just worries, you know. I nodded, gave her the understanding smile. Sure, honey. Your mom worries. That's definitely what that conversation was about. Not conspiracy to commit fraud or anything. Just normal maternal concern. More wine? She asked, already reaching for the bottle. She poured herself a generous glass, practically filled it to the rim. Celebratory drinking, probably. She was so close to her goal, so close to executing the perfect betrayal. Why not celebrate? I held up my glass too, and she poured me some with this indulgent look, like I was a child she was being gracious to. We clinked glasses, and she said something about us and our future and other lies that would have broken my heart if it wasn't already shattered into pieces so small they'd probably never fit back together correctly. The rest of dinner was performance art. Haley chatted at me about nothing. Her day at the boutique, some drama with her coworker Amanda, her plans to get her hair done on Friday. All surface-level nonsense designed to fill space while avoiding any real communication. I nodded along, played the attentive husband, all while thinking about the recording device capturing everything and the copies of documents sitting in 3 different cloud accounts and the money she thought she'd be getting that was already gone. After dinner, she insisted on watching a movie, Some romantic comedy that was probably ironic given our situation. We sat on the couch, her curled against me like we were still a couple who loved each other, and I could hear every sound. The TV dialogue, the soundtrack, her breathing, her phone buzzing with texts she tried to check discreetly. It was my last supper as the fool. The final performance before the truth burned everything down. I was playing the role of devoted, trusting husband one last time, and I was going to make it count. Let her think she'd won. Let her think I was signing away my life without a clue. Let her think her mother's plan was working perfectly. Because tomorrow the volume was turning up permanently. Tomorrow I was done pretending. Tomorrow Haley was going to learn that the man she'd underestimated, the handyman husband she'd dismissed, the dead weight she'd complained about, he'd been listening to everything. And he'd recorded every single word. The next morning, I woke up before Haley, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the sense of calm I felt, like I was standing at the edge of something massive and inevitable. Today was the day. No more pretending, no more playing deaf, no more letting her think she'd gotten away with it. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, moving money, preparing for this exact moment. Now it was showtime. I made coffee in the kitchen, and for the first time in 5 weeks, I didn't move quietly. I let the cabinets close with their normal sound, let the coffee maker beep, let my footsteps fall naturally on the floor. If Haley had been paying attention, she might have noticed the difference. But she wasn't paying attention to me anymore, hadn't been for weeks. I was just background noise in her life, a problem she was about to solve. She came down around 7:30, hair messy, wearing one of those silk pajama sets that cost a fortune and looked like something from a movie. She was scrolling through her phone before her feet even hit the bottom step. Priorities, right? She walked into the kitchen without looking at me, made a beeline for the coffee pot. "Morning," she said absently, not even glancing up from her screen. And that's when I did it. That's when I responded with actual sound, with my actual voice, clear as day. "Morning," I said back. The effect was instantaneous and beautiful. Her whole body went rigid like she'd been electrocuted. The phone slipped from her hand, clattered onto the counter. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, staring at me like I'd just materialized from thin air. "You," she started, but her voice caught. "You spoke." I leaned against the counter, took a slow sip of my coffee, let the moment breathe. I'd been waiting 5 weeks for this, and I was going to savor every second. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone casual, conversational, like this was the most normal thing in the world. Funny thing about hearing, sometimes it comes back. And you know what's even funnier? Sometimes it comes back just in time. Her face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, realization, panic, and finally this sickly pale color like all the blood had drained straight to her feet. "Liam, I held up my hand, cutting her off. Reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Before you start with whatever explanation you're cooking up, I think you should hear something." "Well, hear it again, technically, since you said it the first time." I pulled up the recording from yesterday's dinner. Pressed play. Her voice filled the kitchen, crystal clear, talking to Patricia. "He'll sign anything. He just trusts that I have his best interests at heart." Then Patricia's response. "The business is the tricky part. Benjamin thinks we should go for full ownership." And finally, the kicker. Haley asking, "What about Kyle? Does he need to stay out of sight until this is finalized?" I watched Haley's face as she listened to herself. Watched the color drain even further. Watched her mouth open and close like a fish drowning in air. Watched her hands start to shake. The performance was better than I'd imagined. All those weeks of planning, all those hours of gathering evidence, all building to this perfect moment of watching her realize she'd been caught. When the recording ended, silence filled the kitchen. Not the comfortable silence of a shared mourning, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a marriage dying in real time. "How long?" she whispered, and her voice was barely audible. "How long have you been able to hear?" "Long enough," I said, setting my phone on the counter between us like evidence in a courtroom. "Long enough to hear you call me dead weight. Long enough to hear you and your mother plot to steal everything I've built. Long enough to hear you planning your future with Kyle fucking Mitchell, the same Kyle who cheated on you with your cousin. But hey, at least he has ambition, right?" "Liam, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off, and I let some of the anger seep into my voice now. Not yelling, not losing control, just letting her hear what 5 weeks of betrayal sounded like. Explain how you were going to take my business? The one I built from scratch before I even met you? Explain how you were going to sell the house I bought and paid for? Or maybe explain how you were going to leave me with nothing while you ran off with a guy whose greatest accomplishment is having abs and a cryptocurrency scam. She opened her mouth, closed it again. What could she say? I had recordings. I had evidence. I had her dead to rights, and we both knew it. It's not what you think, she tried, but even she didn't sound convinced. Really, I pulled up another recording, played it. Her voice again. Sometimes I think about what life would have been like if I'd married Kyle. I stopped it there, looked at her. Not what I think. Haley, I've been listening for weeks. I know exactly what it is. You thought you married beneath you. You got tired of pretending, and when I had an accident that made me vulnerable, you saw an opportunity. You and Patricia saw a chance to cash out. Tears started forming in her eyes, and I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered her laughing with her mother about how easily I signed documents. Remembered her calling me dead weight. Remembered every casual cruelty she'd inflicted while thinking I couldn't hear. Those papers you had me sign? I continued. The power of attorney, the business transfer documents, all of it? Yeah, those were fakes. Well, I signed fakes. The real documents are still unsigned and locked away where you'll never find them. So whatever your lawyer Benjamin thinks he has, he doesn't. Her eyes widened. What? And the money you were planning to take? I pulled up my banking app, showed her the joint account balance. $12,000, down from $43,000. Already moved. Legal transfers to accounts in my name only.
The savings, the investments, all of it. Already secured. She grabbed for the phone, stared at the screen like maybe if she looked hard enough the numbers would change. You can't do that. That's our money. No, Haley. That's my money that I earned while you worked part-time selling candles and plotted with your mother to destroy me. And here's the beautiful part. I moved it all while you thought I was deaf and helpless. Every transfer was legal, documented, and completely within my rights. This isn't fair, she said, and the audacity of that statement almost made me laugh. Fair? I set my coffee down carefully, worried I might throw it. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's not fair. Having an accident, losing your hearing, and instead of your wife supporting you, she sees it as an opportunity to rob you blind. That's not fair. Having your mother-in-law call you dead weight while you're sitting 20 feet away is not fair. Planning to steal someone's business because you think they're too disabled to run it? That's not fair. Haley was crying now, full-on sobbing, makeup running down her face. A month ago, this would have broken me. I would have comforted her, held her, tried to fix whatever was wrong. Now I just felt cold. I'm moving out today, I said. Already rented a place across town, already packed the essentials. They're in my truck. You can keep this house for now. We'll let the lawyers figure out who gets what. But I promise you this, Haley, you're not getting my business. You're not getting my savings. You're not getting a damn thing you schemed for. Where are you going? She asked, like that mattered, like she had any right to know. Away from you. I grabbed my keys from the counter, headed for the door. Oh, and one more thing? I made copies of all the recordings. Sent them to my lawyer, backed them up in multiple places. So whatever story you and Patricia try to spin, whatever lies you tell your friends about why we're splitting up, just know that I have evidence. Actual, recorded, undeniable evidence of everything you plan to do. I was almost to the door when I heard her voice, small and broken. Did you ever love me? I stopped, turned around. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, mascara streaks down her face, looking like everything she'd built was crumbling around her. Which, to be fair, it was. Yeah, I said honestly. I did. I loved you so much I would have given you anything you asked for. You didn't have to scheme or plot or manipulate. You just had to be honest. You just had to actually love me back. Her face crumpled, and she slid down the doorframe to the floor, sobbing. I didn't stay to watch. I walked out the front door, got in my truck, and drove away from the house where my marriage had died. And you know what? For the first time in 5 weeks, I felt like I could actually breathe. I drove for about 20 minutes before I realized I had nowhere specific to go, which was hilarious considering I'd just delivered the performance of a lifetime back there. The already rented a place line? Total bluff. Pure improvisation. I hadn't rented anything because up until this morning, part of me wasn't sure I'd actually go through with the confrontation. Turns out rage and betrayal are excellent motivators for commitment. So there I was, cruising down Route 42 in my F-150, windows down, radio playing actual music I could actually hear, feeling simultaneously liberated and completely unmoored. I pulled into a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot because apparently my post-marriage explosion plan was caffeine and contemplation. Very cinematic. My phone started blowing up immediately. Haley, obviously. 12 calls in 5 minutes, followed by a barrage of texts that devolved from, "Please come back, we need to talk," to, "You're being unreasonable," to, "You can't just leave," in record time. I watched the notifications pile up like a car crash in slow motion, each one more desperate than the last. Deleted them all without reading past the previews. Then Patricia called. Of course she did. Haley must have immediately phoned Mommy to report that the dead weight had somehow grown a spine and escaped. I let it ring, watched Patricia Montgomery Ashford flash on my screen 3 times before she gave up. 2 minutes later, a voicemail appeared. I almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity won out. "Liam, this is Patricia." Her voice had that clipped, aristocratic tone that suggested she was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence. "I don't know what Haley said to upset you, but walking out like a child is not the solution. You need to come back so we can discuss this rationally. We have legal documents that require your attention, and abandoning your wife during a difficult time reflects very poorly on your character. Call me back immediately." I actually laughed out loud in my truck. Abandoning my wife during a difficult time? The difficult time that she and her mother had orchestrated? The legal documents that were fake copies of fraud attempts? The audacity was almost impressive. Patricia had spent weeks calling me dead weight and planning my financial destruction, and now she wanted to lecture me about character? I saved the voicemail. Added it to my evidence folder, right alongside the recordings of Haley and Patricia plotting. My lawyer was going to have a field day with this stuff. Speaking of lawyers, I needed one. A real one, not whatever scam artist Benjamin was. I pulled up Google, searched "divorce attorney near me," and started scrolling through reviews. Found a woman named Rebecca Chin with a 5-star rating and reviews that used words like aggressive, thorough, and doesn't mess around. Perfect. I called her office right there in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. "Chin Legal Group, this is Stephanie. Hi, I need to speak with Rebecca Chin about a divorce case. It's urgent. Ms. Chin is with a client right now. Can I take your information and have her call you back?" I gave Stephanie my details, emphasized the urgency, mentioned that I had recorded evidence of fraud attempts and financial manipulation. That got her attention. "Hold on, let me see if Ms. Chin can spare 5 minutes." 3 minutes later, Rebecca Chin was on the line. She had one of those voices that sounded like she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Mr. Carter, Stephanie says you have recordings?" "Hours of them. My wife and her mother plotting to steal my business, take my assets, forge documents. All recorded without their knowledge over the past week." "Were you in the room when these conversations happened?" "Yes. In my own house." "Why?" "Then the recordings are legal. Ohio is a one-party consent state. If you're part of the conversation or present in your own home, you can record without permission." "This is good. Very good. How soon can you come to my office?" "How about now?" Rebecca laughed, and it wasn't a kind laugh. It was the laugh of someone who enjoyed her job a little too much, which in my situation was exactly what I needed. "I like your energy. Come in at 2 p.m. Bring everything you have, recordings, bank statements, documents, all of it. We're going to bury them." I hung up feeling something close to hope for the first time in weeks. At 1:30, I was sitting in Rebecca Chen's office, which was decorated in a style I'd call successful intimidation. Diplomas on the walls, leather furniture, a massive desk that looked like it had witnessed 1,000 marriages die. Rebecca herself was mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I spent 90 minutes walking her through everything: the accident, the hearing loss, the suspicious behavior, the overheard conversations, the recordings, the fake documents, the financial transfers. She listened to the audio files, reviewed my evidence folder, examined the fake documents I'd created, and by the end of it, she was smiling like a shark who'd just spotted dinner. "This is one of the most well-documented cases I've seen in 20 years," she said. "Your wife and her mother essentially handed you a gift-wrapped divorce settlement in your favor. They attempted to defraud you, which we can prove. They plotted to steal marital and separate property, which we can prove. They engaged in infidelity planning, which won't matter for the divorce in Ohio since it's no fault, but it'll matter in the court of public opinion. What about the business? Your business is separate property. You established it before the marriage, kept separate accounts, and have clear documentation. She has no claim to it, especially not after attempting fraud. The house is trickier since you bought it before marriage, but both lived in it. We might have to negotiate there, but given her behavior, I'm confident we can arrange something favorable. And the money I moved?" Rebecca waved her hand dismissively. "All legal. You transferred your own funds from joint accounts you had every right to access. Nothing she can do about it. In fact, her attempts to manipulate you into signing over assets works in your favor. Shows bad faith." We spent another hour planning strategy. Rebecca explained that Ohio's divorce process typically took 9 to 12 months, but given the circumstances, we could probably expedite it. She'd file paperwork by the end of the week, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting immediate temporary orders to prevent Haley from accessing or selling any marital property. "One more thing," Rebecca said as I was leaving. "Expect her to play victim. Expect tears, expect her to tell everyone you abandoned her, expect her mother to launch a social media campaign about what a terrible husband you were. Don't engage. Don't respond. Don't defend yourself publicly. Let the courts handle it. Trust me, I'm done engaging." I left Rebecca's office feeling like I'd just hired a professional hitman, except instead of taking out people, she took out bad marriages. Worth every penny of her $400 an hour fee. My phone had continued exploding throughout the meeting. More calls from Haley, now interspersed with texts from her friends, Jennifer, Melissa, the whole Instagram crew, asking if I was okay and could we talk. Interesting how quickly Haley had mobilized her social network. I ignored them all. What I didn't ignore was the text from my buddy Derek. "Dude, what's happening? Haley's posting some cryptic stuff on Instagram. You good?" I pulled up Instagram, which I rarely used but kept for business purposes. Sure enough, Haley had posted a photo of herself looking devastated, eyes red, sitting on our couch. The caption read, "When you're going through the hardest time of your life and the person who promised to be there just walks away. Heartbroken doesn't begin to cover it. Broken heart # betrayed # heartbroken # marriage struggles." The comments were already rolling in. "Stay strong, girl. You deserve better. Men are trash." The narrative was being written in real time, and in this version, I was the villain who'd abandoned his wife for no reason. I texted Derek back. "Long story. I'm good. Better than good, actually. Ignore whatever she's posting. Truth will come out eventually." Then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I posted my own photo, just a shot of the open road through my windshield, sun setting in the distance. Caption: "Sometimes the best thing you can do is hear the truth and drive towards something better. #new chapter #freedom." Cryptic enough to not violate Rebecca's "don't engage" rule, clear enough that people who knew me would understand something had shifted. By evening, I'd checked into a Holiday Inn Express because apparently my post-confrontation planning skills needed work. As I lay on the generic hotel bed, listening to the ice machine down the hall and the traffic outside, sounds I could actually hear now, sounds I'd missed desperately. I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not happiness exactly, not yet. The betrayal still stung, the anger still simmered, the hurt still ached. But underneath all that was this fundamental sense of relief. I wasn't living a lie anymore. Wasn't pretending everything was fine while my marriage rotted from the inside. Wasn't playing the fool in someone else's con game. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Haley. Please! We need to talk. I can explain everything. I blocked her number. Blocked Patricia's too. They could communicate through lawyers now, which was exactly where people who commit fraud belong. Then I opened my truck window, listened to the world outside, and smiled. After 5 weeks of silence and 5 weeks of betrayal, after discovering that my wife was a stranger and my marriage was a performance, after gathering evidence and planning revenge and finally executing the confrontation I'd been building toward, after all of that, I'd finally heard the truth. And trust me, nothing sounds better than freedom.